Okay, we are live here with Chris Gildon from Puyallup, and Chris is running for state senator for the 25th Legislative District. And my name is Laura Butterfield, and I'm with the Fife Milton Edgewood Chamber of Commerce. I want to welcome everyone who joins us today, and everyone who watches live or watches the recording afterwards. This is our third candidate interview that we've done this year, and we have a few more scheduled, but we will get right into it with Chris. Chris, let's just start out by telling us a little bit about yourself, why you're running for office, and what drew you to this.
Yeah, sure. And thank you for sponsoring this event. I really appreciate the chamber and all of the work that you guys do. So it's important to get the word out so people get to know these candidates. So as she said, I am Chris Gildon. I'm your current representative to the Washington State Legislature in the 25th District. The 25th includes Puyallup, Fife, South Hill, Parkland, and Midland kind of areas. I serve in the House. I serve on 4 committees. I serve on the Housing, Community Development, and Veterans Committee. I serve on the College and Workforce Development Committee. I serve on the Capital Budget Committee, and finally on the Rules Committee. I am a retired Army officer. I did 23 years in the U.S. Army as an engineer officer, most of it as an engineer officer. And during that time, I've had 5 deployments overseas. The first one was in 1998 to 1999 over in Bosnia as a peacekeeping mission. And then after that, twice each to Iraq and Afghanistan. Some of my priorities, and I'm sure that we'll probably get into some of this in a little more detail later, but some of my priorities in the legislature have revolved around the principles of accountability and affordability. And I can speak to some specific bills that I've sponsored along those lines. But specifically, our government must be accountable to the people. And one of our overarching jobs in the legislature is to try and increase affordability for the people that we represent. And specifically, the areas that I've been working on are affordability of childcare, affordability of housing, affordability of college or trade school, and finally, affordability of prescription medications. But above all, the thing that I seek to do in the legislature is honor the will of the voters. And I think if you look at my voting record as compared to, say, the advisory ballots and initiatives that have recently been voted on, you'll see that I'm very much in tune with the people of the 25th District, whether that comes, you're talking about tax policy, you're talking about $30 car tabs, or, probably most recently, the bill that's caused the most amount of consternation with folks is that comprehensive sex education bill. And so anyway, but those are the things that I've been focusing on, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about it a little bit with you today.
All right. Well, we will take a little bit deeper dive into a few of those issues as we go on. But let's start with the city of Fife. What are some of the issues that you see in Fife that you can make a difference on in the Senate, in the state Senate? And how involved are you, and how have you been in Fife and some of the Fife issues, and also as it relates to business?
Mm-hmm. So I guess a couple of different things there is, number one, the Fife mayor and the Fife council, they have done an incredible job of relating the issues that are important to Fife to their legislative delegation. The lobbyist Doug Levy and everybody, they have just been great communicators in letting us know the wishes of the people. The areas of Fife that I represent is the heavily populated areas right there off of River Road, Radiance, and a couple of those other places. And I've really made great efforts to reach out to the people who live there over the last few years. and just to learn about them. If I had to say some of the issues that were most important to the people that I've met in those particular neighborhoods, it comes down to one of the things is affordability. That goes not just with housing, but also with healthcare and access to healthcare. Another part of it that's really big and it's really forefront on the people's minds in that area, it revolves around issues of equity and equality these days. It's a very diverse community that lives there, and lots of immigrants that are in that, really a heavy immigrant population. And that's certainly forefront in the minds of the people who live there. Um, as far as small business goes, so I guess that would be the third part of it, is uh, I am endorsed by NFIB. I am endorsed by the Association of Washington Businesses. And, I vote record clearly for it's the backbone of our economy. And one of the things that I'm worried about right now is with all of the COVID restrictions and the lockdowns, we've seen Wall Street, which is Walmart also,
Mhm.
but Wall Street, which has been doing very, very well. Uh, but we saw a sharp decline in the small retail section and especially in the hospitality section of our economy. So we've got a lot of work to do, and I always just encourage people to shop locally and support those local businesses that are certainly hurting right now. I take every effort that I can to reach out and talk to small business owners and learn about their particular issues. So to all of the hundreds of business owners out there that have taken the time out of their day to educate me on the issues that are important to them over the last couple of years, and how government regulation affects the cost of doing business, and how the cost of doing business therefore has a direct correlation into the pay and benefits and the number of employees that you're able to hire. There's a direct correlation there, and we can't overlook that. Um, let's see. I think one of the biggest things that I've done to try and support small business recently is, whenever we were first locked down after COVID hit, and the governor applied, the lockdowns, everybody across all of Washington state was locked down and under the same policy. I was reaching out and I was talking to voters during that time, and I was probably calling, oh, 200 to 300 voters per day just to touch base with them and see how they're doing and see what's on their mind. And one of the things that I quickly realized is that there were two camps that had materialized. There was one group of people who were just deathly afraid of the health impacts of the virus, and there was another group who was just fearful out of not being able to provide for their families, out of losing their livelihoods. And I quickly realized that we've got to do something better than have a one size fits all policy that applies equally to all four corners of our state. And so I sat down, I did some analysis, and I looked at the numbers, and I saw that, not all of our counties were affected equally with the COVID virus at the time. And it just kind of made sense that not every county should be treated equally. And so I developed a plan. I wrote it down on paper. I sent it out all across the state. I got the support of almost 50 legislators and county executives. And we sent the plan to the governor. And it took about a month of, I don't know, lobbying, arm twisting, begging, pleading, whatever you want to call it. It took about a month, but he finally implemented that plan kind of in part. He took it on a bit of a test drive first, but the plan basically said that let's open up this economy county by county as conditions in that particular county, uh, depending on conditions in that particular county. If a county has very low levels of COVID infections, then, let's let them move out more expeditiously. If perhaps if a county has higher levels of COVID, then maybe we need to have more precautions, but it should certainly be based on conditions within that particular county. So I was really happy to be part of a bipartisan solution. In the beginning, Uh, if I'm honest, which I always am, um, since those initial 4 phases, he put some guardrails on, which I would have done were I in his place too, because I want to have oversight as the executive. Um, but since he implemented those first 4 phases, I think they've been muddied over time. So we now have phase 1.5, phase 2.5. We have exceptions for this and exceptions for that. And now progress on all of the phases is absolutely halted. With I really don't know what success looks like anymore. At what point will we be able to progress through the phases again? What metrics do we have to meet? And I think that's been actually a failure on the part of the governor and his staff. Unfortunately, is one of their large jobs that I think that they should be doing right now is letting the public know what the metrics of success are. If we meet these certain metrics, then that is what defines success. And once we have success, this will be the next step. And I think because of that, what's happening across our state, at least the people that I'm speaking with, and if you feel differently, feel free to reach out to me. I think a lot of people are having COVID fatigue right now, and they don't see the end in sight. They say originally, the purpose of the lockdowns was to flatten the curve and prevent our hospitals from being overwhelmed. Well, we did that. We did that. And, businesses have stayed closed. A lot of doors were shuttered. But, how do we define success? Let's have that conversation. And because I firmly believe that every business that's able to keep its doors open today is certainly going to be a blessing for our tomorrow, not just business, but also for all of those who are employed in that particular business. But we've got a lot of work to do. And I think that's another reason why that the legislature needs to be called back into a special legislative session. We've been making calls, not just me, but other legislators as well. We've been making a lot of calls for a special legislative session since May. But unfortunately, the governor has refused to call us into special session. And there's only 2 ways that we can get called back into special session. One is the governor calls us into special session. And 2 is the legislature can call itself back into session with a 2/3 vote of all of the members of the House and the Senate. Unfortunately, there's just not enough support from the majority caucus, especially in the Senate, to get us back into special session so that we can start doing the work of the people and figuring out, rational, feasible, and acceptable solutions to the problems that we face. So I'm sorry, that was probably a little longer than you wanted.
No, I think that's good. I think you brought up a good point. I was just thinking, I have been confused also about, so I know we're in phase 2, but they just released something the other day about restaurants, and then there's been little trickles here and there of changes, and mostly loosening things up somewhat, which is good, but still, yeah, I think there's still some confusion. So that's a good point.
One of the things that's very important, not just for individuals, so that we can have some sanity in our lives.
Yeah.
Also businesses like some type of predictability. We like to know what the rules of the game are so that we can abide within those rules and figure out, just as Americans have done for centuries, if we know the rules of the game, we can figure out how to succeed.
Yeah. Yeah, I absolutely agree. Well, let's turn a little bit. So we talked a little bit about business recovery, but what are within the legislature? Given the COVID situation, what do you think the issues will be, or the talk will be this year around business recovery, and what kind of things do you think can be done to help businesses in the recovery process?
So I'm trying to think of a couple of good examples, but the ones that come to mind right now, everything that I'm hearing from the majority party during this next session revolves around tax policy, not so much around business recovery policy. What we have right now is back in June, we got the first revenue forecast, and that showed an estimated $8.8 billion budget shortfall that we were going to have. That's a lot of money. That's a lot. Our entire budget is just over 50 billion, so 8.8 billion is a lot of money. We had some good news a couple of weeks ago. We had the most recent revenue forecast, and what it showed is that because a lot of different sectors of our business have been, just warming up and starting to get back on part of where they were, that deficit had shrunk to about $3.8 billion of projected budget deficit. Again, that's projected. It's still a lot of money, but we also have about $2.5 billion in the budget stabilization account. That's our rainy day fund. So whenever we look at those numbers, certainly whenever we were looking at an $8.8 billion deficit, maybe one could see the need to talk about taxing policy, but whenever we've shrunk it down to where it is right now, and who knows what it's going to be in a couple of months, the way things are developing so quickly, I think it makes calls for all of those new taxes a lot less relevant to the discussion, even to a lot of those people who had proposed them, whether it was the capital gains income tax, the carbon fuel tax, or the pay per mile tax. And we'll probably talk a little bit more about the pay per mile tax whenever we talk about transportation. But certainly, if you take the capital gains tax and you just think about it, families and small businesses have been hurting for more than 6 months now. And to think that this would be the right time to tax capital, it makes no sense to my mind, and I certainly won't support it. Our policy should incentivize people to bring capital into Washington state rather than give them incentive to move it out of the state. And we see a little bit of that with Boeing just announced that they're moving 787 production out of state. That budget forecast into account, but we need to incentivize people and businesses to our state, not to divest capital from our.
Right. All right. Thank you. Well, let's move topics and let's talk a little bit about workforce development. I heard you say in the beginning that you serve on the workforce development committee. So, and with the economy and the way jobs are right now, I think that workforce development is more important than ever. And this is an issue that's really important for the chamber. We work really closely with the 5 school district and have a workforce development program that we do in partnership with them. And, having a strong workforce development program will be important going into the future. So what are some of the things that you see as far as workforce development that you can make a difference on?
Yeah, sure. And whenever we're talking about workforce development, the name of the committee is College and Workforce Development, right? Mm-hmm. So I kind of take that as our mandate. Our mandate is to develop Washington State's future workforce. Whether that comes from the traditional 4-year colleges or whether that comes from the trade schools or, whatever the case may be, apprenticeships, all of that.
Yeah, I think it's everything. You're right. It's all the way from the school system to the college system and beyond. So, yeah, thanks for.
Whenever I'm talking about that, I always think about Dr. Stephen Covey, his 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And I forget what number it is, 2 or 3. But one of the habits is always begin with the end in mind. And I think that's so important whenever we're talking about workforce development, because if it's education is key. And if we begin thinking about education with the end in mind, it starts in grade school and middle school and high school and then the trade school or college, whatever it may be. But we've got to consider that entire educational pipeline whenever we're thinking about developing
Are you there?
I'm back now. Somebody was just trying to give me a phone call, but
Oh, okay.
I had a issue having to do this on my iPhone right now. But certainly developing that workforce is, and that revolves around education. And just this last biennium, we took the uh, we turned we created the we created a grant. No, I'm sorry. We converted a grant into an entitlement, right? And what it did is it says if you are a student and your family is of certain income thresholds or below, then the state is going to pay for your college education, or at least a percentage of it. Um, I wasn't necessarily a fan of that bill, and I did not vote for it for a number of reasons in the 2019 session. In the 2020 session, I came back and I offered a couple of bills I thought would help fix that. One of the bills, because it's our mandate to develop Washington State's workforce, right? Not another state's workforce. So this particular bill had no sideboards, no requirements that after receiving a free college education, so-called free, it's a taxpayer funded education, but after receiving this great benefit, benevolence of the people of Washington State, there was no requirement that the student either live or work in Washington State. So I brought back said for every year that you receive this benefit, you would be required to live or work in Washington State for an equal amount of time. And if you did not do so, then that's fine. But the remaining portion, whatever the delta is, would be converted to a 0% interest loan that you would have to then back according to a lot of the same terms as student loans today. Because, I don't want the last thing I want is for the people of Washington State to pay for a college education and have a student graduate and then move to California or New York the day after they graduate.
Yeah.
Very tough. Another bill that I brought back said that we would go ahead and pay for this college education so long as the student pursued a degree in a career field that was in demand from Washington State business. If they wanted to pursue a degree in basket weaving, one of the degrees that you really can never get a job in, then fine, they can fund it up front, but then you got to repay on the back end.
That makes sense.
Yeah, the idea is we want them to be feeding into our future workforce, right? We don't want them to be pursuing degrees that they'll never be able to get employment from.
Right.
So that's things that were on my mind. None of those bills were allowed to pass. They did get a courtesy hearing in the College and Workforce Development Committee, but never came up for a vote. But it is certainly something that I'm always going to be a watchdog for, is I'm going to make sure that the people get bang for their buck.
That's great. Thank you. Let's move on to transportation. Senator Zeiger for many years was a champion for 167 and the completion of 167. How do you see things going forward? Is that something that you'll continue championing, the transportation? And there's still parts of final phases of 167 that are not completely funded yet. How do you see? What's your views on transportation?
Yeah, so transportation is always a topic of concern. And it's one of those things that's kind of unique because it does not just affect the 25th district. It's got to be a regionalized concept. And that's, I think we're very fortunate here in Pierce County because in Olympia, we have what's called the Pierce County Delegation. And it's quite an actual powerful delegation within the legislature. So what it is it's a combination of every legislator, every member of the House, every member of the Senate, regardless if you are Republican or Democrat. We come together every year and we determine what are the priorities for Pierce County that we can all get behind and we can all try to enact. things like 167 and stuff like that. And I think that that's been so helpful on the transportation front. Not only do we have 167 that's going to be completed from where it dead ends all the way out to the Port of Tacoma, but Fife residents will be especially excited to know that we are also on track to have Canyon Road pushed all the way out over the river, over 70th Street. We're gonna get rid of that horrible over 66th Street that's always such a traffic jam. I mean, I am nervous every time I go across that.
You and me both.
And it is such a log jam. So we're going to get rid of that. We're going to have a new bridge going over 70th Street, a two-way bridge, and going all the way out into that'll connect out into the warehousing district in Fife. So that's going to help out a lot in that traffic around. And I know there's so much frustration from the people who have to commute across that 66th Street bridge area every day.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. And 167, one of the big things that we were able to do in the last 2 years, and Senator Zeiger spearheaded this, is we were able to shorten the completion time by 3 years over in the last legislative session. And I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but there's a lot that goes into it. This thing, it was not scheduled to be done until 2031. And we were able to shorten that timeline by 3 years. So that's 3 years closer to less traffic congestion. And, that's something that I think we can be really proud about. Gus, too. But
yeah, I think that is a big deal, the 3 years. I sit on the steering committee, the 167 steering committee, and I know the work that went into to that plan, and it's a big deal.
It is a big deal. And I think moving forward, I think we're likely going to see a transportation package, another transportation package coming either maybe this year, maybe the next, but certainly coming soon. And so that's something that we've got to plan for. But a large debate that's happening within the legislature right now is how we fund transportation projects. And there's a couple of competing ideas. Because, the gas tax is protected by the 18th Amendment, meaning that for people who don't know, revenue collected from the gas tax has to be used for transportation infrastructure projects. And that's actually an amendment in the Constitution. It's very firm. We're looking at ways at expanding that or possibly even reducing our reliance on the gas tax as we fund transportation projects in Washington state. What we've seen is vehicles have become more fuel efficient, a lot more electric vehicles. And although some people say revenues from gas tax have gone down, actually they've pretty much remained flat. But what's happened is the cost of construction has just gone up and up and up. And so we're looking at ways to do that. And there's a couple of competing ideas in the legislature. One of them, as I mentioned briefly a minute ago, is the pay per mile tax, where you would have some type of a device installed in your car, and it would track how many miles that you drive, and then you would have to pay a certain amount per mile. Definitely, I'm not going to support that one. The proposal that I think I could get behind is a proposal to reduce our reliance on the gas tax over a 10-year period and replace it with an existing revenue source. So there's not a new tax. This is an existing source. And it has a clear nexus to transportation funding. And the revenue source is the state's portion of the sales tax on motor vehicles. So, obviously there's a nexus between the sale of a motor vehicle and construction of a road for that vehicle to drive on. It's quite a large revenue source. It's large to support all of our transportation needs. One of the big complaints about the gas tax is that it's a regressive tax. And certainly I think we could agree that, the sale of a motor vehicle, the tax sale of a motor vehicle is not a regressive tax. And so I think that's something that we could get behind. we'd probably phase it in over the course of about 10 years so that we can make course corrections as, as we work through, navigate through the system. But we've got either the second or the third highest gas tax in the nation right now. And if you've driven through Tacoma, you've got to wonder where all of that transportation money is going and how it's being spent. So we've got a lot of work to do. And specifically, a little strategically in the legislature, Senator Zeiger was on the Transportation Committee, and Representative Chambers, my seatmate, is on the Transportation Committee in the House. Assuming that she's reelected and I am elected to the Senate, we're going to have to figure out those committee assignments so that we get the best amount of coverage. If she's going to continue to be on the Transportation Committee, then possibly I will consider moving over to a different fiscal committee within the Senate. There are 3 different fiscal committees in the House. You have the operating budget, which is the big one, the transportation budget, and then the capital budget. Right now, we have all 3 of them covered with our delegation, and I would like to continue to see all 3 of those covered for the 25th district.
Yeah, that's very important. Okay, let's move on and talk about housing. There's a housing shortage right now. Home prices are going up. Construction costs are going up. It's a big issue. What can be done in the legislature to address housing?
Well, at its core, it's a matter of supply and demand, right? If we look at the most recent numbers, we have about 250,000 housing units short in Washington state. And I mean, basic premise of supply and demand, whenever supply is low and demand is high, prices are going to go up. So we've got to get at building more houses. People need places to live. We did a little bit of good work in the House and Senate last biennium. We sent a good amount of money over to the Housing Trust Fund to build affordable housing units. And they had the Joint Legislative Audit and Review Committee did an assessment of housing in Washington state, specifically affordable housing. And what they found is that the grant money given out by the Housing Trust Fund typically goes to nonprofits, right, to build those. But what they found is that private developers build same housing units for between 13 and 24% less cost than these nonprofits. And so, of course, I proposed a bill that said, Housing Trust Fund, figure out ways to get more private developers into the affordable housing building business. We're $250,000 short, 250,000 units short, and we certainly have enough work for everybody. We need to get all of our teammates on the field pushing in the same direction to achieve the goal. We did have some more success with condominium liability reforms. It had been about a decade in many parts of the state since the last condominium units were built, and a lot of that had to do with liability. We've still got a little work to do on that front. We had a little bit of success with allowing homeowners to construct accessory dwelling units on their property.
Oh, I think we lost him. He may have another phone call coming in.
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
I don't see video. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, but I can't see you.
Okay, let's see if I can get that video going back again or not. I don't know. But condominium liability reform is certainly, I'm sorry, I covered condominium liability reform. We were on accessory dwelling units, just to provide, additional units for people in need. But whenever I talk to builders, and I talk to a lot of builders, and I ask them, what is driving the cost of housing up? The one thing that they always tell me is there's a couple of areas: land, labor, and lumber
Mhm.
They're pretty much set. You can't really do much with land, the cost of land. You can't really do much with the cost of labor or lumber. But the next biggest driver of cost is, and I'm not
There we
is, I
go.
think I'm coming back up. There we go. Oh, sorry, I was a little distracted.
It's okay.
Uh, is is the cost of uh, permitting and holding costs, and those two are really they're joined at the hip, so to speak. Uh, what I've heard from a lot of the builders is from the time that they purchase dirt until they're able to sell that first house, it could be 3 to 5 years. And a lot of that has to do with the permitting process in the different jurisdictions. But more so than the cost of permitting is the cost of holding the land. Because you figure every single day that they hold that land, that they're not able to make a sale, there is an associated cost with that. And that cost is obviously passed through to it's passed through to that homeowner. And so I did sponsor a bill last session that it was a little punitive to municipalities, but it basically said you have a certain amount of time to process a permit. And if you do not process it within that time, I did give them the ability to request an extension. But if you do not process the permit within the specified timeline, then it will be deemed approved, right? And that was just kind of to light a fire under a lot of these municipalities who are not necessarily friendly at, because some of these permits, they're taking 6 months or more to process. Uh, yeah, and then you have to, something's wrong or something, piece of data is missing and you have to reapply and it's another 6 months. And the next thing you know, you're 18 months into permitting. And that's just not right. We can do better than that. So definitely have a lot of work to continue doing in that arena.
Okay, certainly we do. Okay, one final topic that I have to talk about, and then I'll leave it to you for some closing comments. But let's talk finally about mental health. Um, you know, it's a big issue,
Yeah.
and I know that it's something that you've talked about somewhat. So tell us what your views are on mental health and what can be done in that arena.
Well, and I'm glad. Thank you for phrasing the question the way that you did, because so many people conflate. They say you've got to fix homelessness. And then I ask them specifically what they're talking about, and they're talking about the people that they see on the streets, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they say that they're trying to fix homelessness. And whenever you dig down to it, what they're really trying to do is they're trying to help those people who are suffering on the streets. And a lot of those people who are suffering on the streets are suffering from mental illness, and they're also suffering from drug addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And we were able to make a little bit of help last session. I think I may have some numbers here, but they're not on this page. But we increased capacity for mental health treatment by some amount of dollars. I think 50 million or something like that. It's not enough. And I think certainly one of the opportunities that we have this next legislative session, whenever we have to take a real hard look at the state budget, is we're going to have to make sure that our budget accurately reflects our state's priorities, right? And I mentioned earlier the free college that was passed in the last biennium, taxpayer-funded college. That came at a cost of about $900 million. Now, to put this in perspective, we were already one of the best states before that bill at providing assistance for our college students. We're one of the best in the nation. So I don't think that was something that was probably a top priority. However, at the time, if we were to ask what is the number one problem that we have, you would mention homelessness, mental health, drug addiction. Those would all be at the top of the list. That same legislative session, we allocated 300 million towards those activities. And so I think that the budget needs to reflect our shared priorities. And so, I would take that 900 million from college, something that we're really, really good at, and I probably would have reversed it. And decades long that we've been not adequately funding our capacity to serve those who are mentally ill. Western State lost certification. That also means we're losing millions of federal dollars every year that it is not certified. It's not going to be something that we can fix overnight. It took a long time for us to dig into this hole, and I think it's going to take a while for us to dig out. But I think we also have to be wise in how we use our resources. I was in a capital budget committee meeting last session, and one of the things that really, really surprised me is all of our state hospital systems across Washington State, we right now have about 500,000 square feet of unused space. So it's vacant. And a lot of that is like either dormitory style housing or cabana style housing, or a lot of it could be converted over to housing, or possibly some of it could even be, rented out to private organizations who could use it for, housing units, for affordable housing units. But I come from a commercial real estate background. And for those of you who are familiar with the Flash Cube buildings by 512 and the Puyallup River ones, so I was the property manager for that for a while. And, one of my metrics of success was vacancy rates. How many square foot of this building is vacant at any given time? Well, my goodness, we have 500,000 square feet of vacant space that is just deteriorating that we could be using for some purpose. Certainly, goodness gracious, let's get those assets into use.
Okay, well, great ideas here. I so appreciate your time. I want to give you a few minutes to just give some final thoughts, and if there was something that we didn't talk about that you'd like to talk about, now's your chance.
Yeah, no, thank you so much again for hosting this. It's always great to get out and talk. And I certainly welcome more interaction from the Fife Milton Edgewood Chamber, as well as all the members that I represent in Fife. There seems to be something in the water. I don't know what the deal is. I try to reach out to the folks over in Fife, but I don't hear a lot except for the mayor and the city council. So please, please, please feel free to reach out to me anytime. I want to hear from you. I want to connect with you. I want to listen to your concerns. I want to hear what keeps you up at night, because that's the only way that I'm going to be able to represent you well, is if I know what's in your hearts. Like I said, I think I've done a very good job at, if we look at all of the ballots that are cast, the advisory ballots and stuff, I've done a very good job of representing your will in the legislature. I certainly look forward to moving up to the Senate to do the same. I certainly have some big shoes to fill, because that seat was previously held by Jim Castema, who is a Democrat who I have great respect for and who's endorsed my campaign. Then Bruce Danmeyer, who's now the Pierce County executive. And then, currently occupied by Hans Zeiger, who is just one of the most thoughtful and intellectual leaders that we have in Olympia. So he will sorely be missed in Olympia, but Pierce County is going to be glad to have him on the council. Moving forward, I think the biggest thing that I'm going to be focused on is obviously the budget, and making sure that the budget reflects our priorities. And then a couple of other areas that I think I'm going to be focused in on. But a lot of it's going to revolve around agency effectiveness this next session. And I think we saw with somebody just texted me, I got to get rid of the thing. Okay. I think we saw with, since COVID, we saw some cracks in our system, and we got to make sure that we are effective and efficient across all the agencies in Washington State. And some of the most clear examples are all of the delays that we've had with people getting their unemployment benefits from the Educational Security Department. Uh, we saw 650 million of taxpayer dollars just get robbed because of inadequate security protocols. We saw the health department was very slow in reacting to provide assistance to what we knew was the most vulnerable segment of our population, the long-term care facilities. I had a Zoom meeting with some of the providers, the private providers here in the 25th district just yesterday. They said that they had not gotten PPE until about a month ago from the state. And it wasn't until 2 weeks ago that they got guidance from the Department of Health on testing procedures in their facilities. That was more than 6 months into a pandemic, and this is our most affected, most uh, at risk population. So I think we've got a lot of work to do to make sure that our agencies are acting effectively and efficiently on behalf of the people of Washington State. So I think going in right now, I think those are some of the things that I'm going to be working towards. The other part of it is, um, I didn't mention this, but I had the opportunity in my last deployment in Afghanistan to lead the peace program, meaning my job was to go out and facilitate negotiations with the insurgents to figure out what was the root cause of fighting in their particular areas and how could we bring peace to it. Well, folks, right now, I will say that our country is in turmoil. The Pierce County is in turmoil. We've got a lot of families who are just being ripped apart. Friendships are being ripped apart due to politics and current events. And certainly, one of the things that I want to focus on personally is not really policy or anything like that, but I want to do everything that I can to work heal political divisions within our community and our state because uh, we're all in this together. And regardless if you're Republican, you're Democrat, regardless of the color of your skin, your zip code, your economic status, your educational status, we're all Washingtonians. We're all valuable. And I treasure and cherish each and every one of you. And certainly uh, want to be part of the solution of bringing us together rather than dividing us. So thank you.
Well, thank you. That was a great way to end it. Representative Gildon, we appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule today to be with us. And um, we hope that everyone will watch this and share it. And please join me on Friday. I don't recall what time. I should have looked this up before before I said something, but I'll be interviewing Sarah Rumbaugh, I believe at 10 a.m. on Friday. So tune in at that time for our next interview. But thank you, Representative Gildon, and we hope that everyone has a great day.